No?
She was saying.
Okay, that's good. That'd get
That's
everybody
good.
quiet.
That's progress.
Okay. So I think I
We
can
do.
go over to-
Yeah.
over
When it's
here.
blowing up right now.
Do the-
You've got,
Feels like what?
Here we go.
900 residential.
Go away?
Yeah, I know. It's just like, I do it all.
Won't be much.
Okay.
That's why.
So I have to say my little speech here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you guys go.
Mine are like high wire on me.
Hit record, yay. I think it's being recorded, right? The little button says
I
it's
heard it
being
said it.
recorded. Okay, deep breath. All right, here we go. All right. Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm Catherine Wygant Fawcett, the Executive Director of the IFOB. It's great to see you all in person and on Zoom. And I'm playing the part of Brooke and IT and tech and speaker today. So I'm gonna come over here and go to chat and get on that. So if we're a little late on the chat, I apologize, but Brooke is I say I am the engineer and she's the conductor. And she keeps us on time on the train because there's only two of us. And while I'm there, and I'm gonna go off script, I was very excited because for the first time in 11 years, I got us into the main plan giving guide. So this is up here. And these are the whole two people. So we do 40 programs. We had 40 applications for the scholarships. If you were there last night, you saw that. We had over 500 nominations and 44 applications. So we've been a little crazy busy, but it's all good. And if you want to know about us, I also have copies of these out on the front table. So, and I'm going off script. I don't want to tell about it, but okay. So we're recording this program for later viewing and we'll send out the contacts. So we'll have it all recorded. We'll have resources. We'll also, when we do the follow-up, if for you who were not there last night, I think many of you were, we had our awards, the 25th anniversary. And Matt was our guest speaker and he'll come and tell us a little bit more. So when we follow up, we will have recipes, resources, and other things, plus this recording for when we get that probably next week. Right. Oh, I already said for that. Okay. You get extra credit for coming today if you went last night and today. So thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. So we're delighted to have Tammy Buss here, founder and family business advisor from BlueRoots, our cousin from the north, joining us today with Nicole. Nicole's here too. There's Nicole in the back. To continue our chat with Matt Nielson, last night's guest speaker and a third generation of owner of Nielson-Massey Vanillas. And the cookies out there, you can run out. Some of those have his vanilla extract in it that we had last night. Quite fittingly, they will be discussing the 3-circle model that you will see on our logo that's here and for the awards. And how many of you all remember Maddie Corson? Okay, Maddie Corson started the awards 25 years ago, and she purposely picked these 3 circles to talk about family and family business. And Tammy will give you a deep dive into what those are. When Maddie told me, I thought it was like family, business, and the community, but it's a little bit more complex, which Tammy will tell you about that. Our final how-to, anybody have questions about finances? Anyone? Well, we're gonna have mastering business finances from bookkeeping to strategic planning, bookkeeping versus controller versus CFO, and month-end madness. So that will be right here in this room on November 6th. Thank you, Seth, for hosting us for that and tonight. And we'll have this here from 8 to 10 in the morning. The speakers will be Jacques Santucci, President Opus Consulting, and Nick Sampson. And we also have on page 42, not that I've memorized it, the upcoming programs. We already have 3 booked for next year. Allagash, not Allagash, but we'll have beer sometime. At Estimate, we're gonna have June 23rd is National Family Owned Business Day, and they're winners. Glad I can tell them now. I had to keep that secret for a while. We're gonna go to their facility in Powell and on June 23rd, and all the flowers and the hanging baskets, and it'll be spring, and we'll celebrate National Family Owned Business. Okay, so at the end of this program, I'll hand out a survey. I put them all on the table for you guys. Please, and I'll put it in the chat. And for if you could please fill that out, because that's how we build our programs for next year. And because I'm asking you to do that, we'll have some door prizes from Tammy with her book. She'll tell you about that. And she'll also have them for sale. And we'll also put that in the email. And then now I'm gonna, And I have to thank, we have Phil Cohen from M&T Bank, and we have Michael Smith from Wilmington Trust, and they are also sponsoring us today. So I will let them say a few words, and then I promise I will turn it, Tammy will take us away from there. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks so
I'm gonna
much,
go this way.
Catherine. So as Catherine said, I'm Phil Cohen. I'm our regional president for M&T Bank here in Maine. I want to congratulate the entire organization on an awesome event last night. What a great way to showcase the commitment to the communities, the businesses, what those businesses are then able to give back to the community. I don't think there was a better depiction that could have been pulled together than what you guys demonstrated. So I always love that to punctuate the fall season and really kick things off. Probably fitting now that fall seems to have actually started this week.
Yep.
In any event, really wanted to thank everybody for coming today. Great to see many familiar faces and meet some new ones. We're really proud to be part of the community here in Maine. And we're unique within the banking landscape. I like to talk about ourselves as really being the perfect blend of big bank, small bank. We are very community focused, yet we have the balance sheet and the ability to scale with companies from, really inception, startup phase with basic banking needs, all the way up through a sort of full growth and ultimately exit. We're here talking about family businesses, so hopefully it's how can we help you hand things off to the next generation if that's your plan. But we have full service capabilities, and we also are really unique in that we've got a Wilmington Trust brand, which is not only, your basic wealth advisory platform, but does a significant amount beyond that in terms of institutional services and other servicing that come along with mergers, acquisitions, and really any needs and how to maximize your investments and your funds that might be sitting, waiting to get deployed on the balance sheet. So I want to turn it over to Mike to say a few words about Wilmington, and thank you all for the time.
Thanks, Phil. Hi, everybody. Mike Smith. Kind of a Mainer in that my family lived on Peaks Island for most of my life. I was in DC and overseas, so moved back here last year. And great to be back. Based here in the Old Port, covering New England generally, but really we have a growing business here in the Old Port. As Phil mentioned, we work a lot with not just family-owned businesses, but all kinds of businesses, particularly early stage startups, helping them source funding from VC and PE. And then eventually, if they are going to transition either to family members or to an acquirer, we help with that process in sourcing M&A advisors, but also importantly, way before that, how the business is owned from day one, or if it's transitioning from a previous generation, as was mentioned last night, how do you kind of allocate share ownership to active family members, maybe more passive ones? So a lot of that, the sort of ownership of the business, custody, trust and estate planning, and someday down the road, how is it going to move to the next generation? We do quite a lot of that work. We started life as the DuPont family office, so that was our origins as quite a large family business, but then how they managed the family going forward and all the branches of it. So great to be here today, and great to meet you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Good morning again.
Again and again.
Again. Hope everybody had fun last night. I've been telling people last night's event was the most amazing awards event I've ever been to. So just the combination, the space I thought was amazing. The vibe was amazing. It was very vanilla centric, which was a little embarrassing to me, but.
Do you want us to dance?
Exactly. I was gonna say, where's my theme music coming on today?
We'll put that in the
That's
lyrics
okay.
if you're okay with that.
But it was super fun. So happy to be here with Tammy and BlueRoots and talk more family business.
Yeah, really, it's just what we are. So today, as was mentioned, we're going to talk about the power of three. And this is really understanding the family business dynamics. And it's nice because I can talk about how they work, and Matt can actually explain how they really work in real life scenarios. But I thought we'd start with some statistics.
Yeah.
So there's 32 million, and this is as of, I think it's 22 or something, 32 million family businesses in the US. And just as a information, there's 32 million people in Canada. So,
Wow.
so yeah, there's a lot of family businesses here. And really, when you look at it, 78% of family businesses have been in business more than 30 years. When you think about it, first gens, and it's going to go to second, tends to be around for a while. But also 46% family businesses pay above average wages, which is kind of nice, right? And benefits, because you're competing, right? You're not competing with the great big companies. You might be competing with the great big companies, but
Yeah.
you still have that family values that you set up, right?
Mhm.
And so really, you want to have retention of your employees.
Yep.
And 70% have generational employees. So people have been around, right? They brought their family members.
Yeah, that was a
Find that?
really interesting statistic that this is all from Family Enterprise USA. And when I saw that statistic, I was really shocked at how high that was, that there are, employees or parents that have worked that now have kids working or grandparents. And so that's pretty amazing to see that in family business.
Well, it's about core values, right? And,
Mhm.
and the culture that you've created. So family businesses play a huge part of the economy. And anyway, you can read all that, but you can see what the impact is on GDP. And I know this was mentioned last night, and we talk about this all the time, that only 30% make it to Gen 2, 12 to Gen 3, and, less than 3 really to Gen 4. So to have, a generation like this, and Chalmers, again, 100 and gazillion years old, this is really important, because what I find as a family business advisor is I don't think it's intentional that they don't transition. I think it's because it's hard. And when you're a first generation, when you start your business, you don't think of it as a family business. You really start your business to pay the bills, right? And then you just are really good at your craft, and you end up getting help. And before long, you're in your 50s or 60s, and you turn around and you got this business behind you. And you're like, I never even thought of it as a family business. And where do I start, right? So I think that's the reason. I don't think it's intentional. And then once you go through the first one, I think the issue becomes, when you're adding more people, right? So it's okay if you're transitioning to 2, but what happens when it's 4, 6, 10, 12? It becomes more complex.
Yep.
So anyway, we're here to, try to beat the odds and, have successful transitions. My role, by the way, at BlueRoots is to keep family businesses in the family. So, I kind of go against the M&A guys. It's like, but you can still help value the business and make the value worth more to however that succession is. But what I found is working with family businesses for 40 plus years is that, and being a family business myself and successfully transitioned one business and now in a second family business, is that, it's the education and communication that's really, really hard to do. And so we're here to help you sort of work through that. I want to talk about the 3-circle model.
I'll go for it.
We haven't
You're
really
the
discussed this.
consultant.
We just talked about this a little bit. So the
We even
3-circle.
coordinated talking points.
Yeah. So the 3-circle model was actually developed at Harvard back in the 70s. And it's really the foundational piece for all family businesses. I got to tell you, it was one of my aha moments when I understood the 3-circle model. And I just cannot believe that it's not out there for everybody to understand. Like, it's there, but you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yep.
So we're going to sort of go through what they are and show you how you can help, whether you're an advisor to family businesses or you're in a family business. Understanding the 3-circle model will help you in whatever business you're in. So I'm going to talk about the family circle. It's pretty simple, right? It's really all family members, right? It's impacted by key family members.
Right.
Right?
Yep, for sure.
And the decisions in the family circles are usually impacted by emotions and, traditions and family values, things like that. And the roles really of each person impact what happens in the entire family.
Yep.
Right? Does that
Yeah,
sort of
definitely.
sum it up pretty good?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think the key there is it's the emotions, it's the history you have as a family, right? Like little things like my sister remembering that I pulled her pigtails when she was 8 years old, right? And she's now, 50 something. I'm not allowed to say that, but she's now 50 something, right? And that kind of mentality can still linger, not necessarily the pigtails, but just, like that I'm the little brother and maybe I don't know as much as I think I know. And she's the big sister, but, so yeah, that can definitely play a role in how you interact as a family.
And so you look at what the family is. So remember, the family circle is family members. And the definition of family member is really your own definition of families. As your first generation, it might just be your kids, but as you get deeper into the generations, it's now the in-laws, right? So the spouses and then the kids and the cousins, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And who's involved in that family? So the family initially might be 4. So you go, well, I don't know why we need family meetings. I don't know why we need anything. There's only 4 of us. Well, I can tell you that you can have 4 people not aligned at all in family decisions. So understanding the family and then what the responsibilities are of the family. And again, so when you're talking to clients, and we have this out here for a reason, that you're focusing on, is this a family question? So it's dealing with the family itself. And that's the relationships within the family, the pulling of the pigtails.
Yep.
Also maintaining family traditions. Like we all have family traditions. It's coming up for us Thanksgiving this weekend. I know yours is in November. But think of the traditions, and they've started, years ago. There's a story that this woman is going to put the ham in the oven for Thanksgiving, and she cuts off the end of the ham, and the daughter says, "Mom, why do you cut off the end of the ham before you put it in the oven?" She goes, "Well, I don't know. Ask Grandma. Grandma probably knows why."
Yeah.
So Grandma says, she says, "Grandma, why do you cut the ends off the ham?" She goes, "Well, it just didn't fit in the pan." So it's a tradition, right? You cut off the end of the ham because your mother did it or your grandmother did it, and it goes on through the generations, right? But there's a tradition there, and someone's got to keep that going, right? There's always someone in the family who wants to keep the traditions going. So when we talk about families, like, what is it? Who's going to be the person to lead those traditions, right? It's also the behaviors. How do you behave as a family member? I mean, your role as a family is to raise your children to be respectful and, great humans.
Yep.
Right? That's your role. So that's the whole family's role, is to raise the kids, to develop the next gen.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the hardest things is how do you develop the next gen and how do you onboard your next gen? It's something, I've got an 11-year-old and a 2-year-old, so it's something I'm very conscientious about and thinking about, and don't have the answer to. So, we're trying to build out essentially kind of an educational plan on how do you, engage them in the business. My son knows what we do. He knows what the bottle looks like. He's not afraid to walk into a store and pick it up and go across the store, "Hey, Dad, here's your product." Which is, as I said last night, I don't have an ego that embarrasses me, but it's funny. But it's great for him to see that and to recognize that, like, we have a tangible product that he can see and he can be proud of, hopefully be proud of, and maybe someday, if he so desires and is qualified, join us. But it's great to have those connections. And then the family relationship piece, particularly when you work in siblings or cousin consortiums, it's really important that you maintain those relationships on some level. You don't necessarily have to be best friends. In our family dynamic, we're not best friends, but we get together for holidays and we see each other for work. But it's still important to maintain those relationships and be able to have trust, first of all, among the family, so that you can then know that you can, move forward and rely on each other as you work on, the ownership piece or the business piece.
And it takes time. I mean, when you're a first generation going to second, when you look at developing the second generation, you haven't even started to develop the next generation because you haven't really considered yourself a family business yet, right? And that's where you have to look at opportunities. But as you go deeper into the generations, you do realize that this is a family business and you engage the next generation sooner. You start talking about opportunities. So the disconnect is from first to second, right? Because you didn't really consider yourself that. So they're responsible for, estate planning and succession planning. So estate planning, of course, is the whole enterprise, not just the operating company or the holding company. It's everything. It could be the artwork you have, the properties, jewelry, assets, retirement assets, cash. So it's everything is the responsibility of the family, is to do that estate plan. But succession planning is also in the family. So when you look at succession planning, it's not just the business, it's the family. Who's going to maintain cutting off the end of the ham? right? Who's going to do that? What are the traditions you want to keep? There's always someone in the family who's going to take on that role, right? And we talk a lot about communication. And one of the things is you're going to have somebody in the family who's going to want to take that role on, like they're the bossy one or whatever, but that's part of their role as a family. If you want to have a family stay together, you need to understand, okay, Susie's going to take it over. She always does. She's going to be the new mom or the new grandma, right? And so understanding that there's a reason why you want to keep the family together. And a lot of times it's the matriarch in the family circle.
Yeah,
That is
can be.
a lot of times, I'm just
Yeah,
saying, not
yeah,
all the
yeah.
time, there's the guys, but most of the time it's the nurturing side of the female that someone steps up to take it over.
I like to call it the family champion. It's
Yeah.
somebody who is that singular person that can champion the family and rally the family and keep those traditions alive.
Yeah, because you need that or they get lost, right? They're like, well, who's got grandma's recipe? Like nobody got grandma's recipe. Someone's got to do that. But really the overall alignment of the family really comes down to core values, mission and vision statements. And again, as a first generation, you tend not to have these documented. You have them because you started your business. Maybe you left an employer because, you didn't fit in right, or you didn't like the way they treated somebody or the way they, cut corners. So you end up going out on your own. So you already have established your core values. The difference is that you haven't actually written them down and shared them with people, right? And really, when you're building a culture of the business, you have to have core values. It's one of the first things we do when we work with families is to get that out. When I'll ask them, one of the questions we ask in discovery is, what are your core values? Like, I don't know. I think we have them there. I think we did that like 20 years ago. I had one person say, yeah, I think they're with the lawyer. Because they're like, what are core values? Well, you have them. We all have them. It's just a point of teasing them out. And my second book is actually an exercise on how to do that. It's very basic information. It's how do you get your core values and the mission and vision of the family. We tend to think of them as the business, but you do as a family. It's hard when you're a family of 4 to do this, but as you go deeper into the generation, so you might be doing some of it now and some of it might be kept till, you're deeper into the generations, but core values are key. It's where you give, where you donate, what you do as a family, where you spend your time, how you give back to the community, what's important to you,
How
right?
you act. And it is like identifying those core values is particularly as you are thinking about how do you want to continue to progress, both as a family, but also as a business. And when you think about governance, because if you're not aligned on what the values are, like the values are your foundation, then you gotta start somewhere, and that's where you start. When we first started working with family business consultants about 15 or so years ago, as we were setting up our independent board and everything, that was one of the first things they did was they had us identify core values. They had us do it independently, which was interesting. So we all kind of picked 5 words that we thought represented our core values, and then we got together and shared that. And what was great is that like 4 out of the 5 were the same. We might have picked different words, like my brother picked knowledge and I picked authority, and I wasn't thinking authority as in power. I was thinking authority like being the authority in a subject, which was the same as knowledge, right? So we picked different words, but they all meant the same thing. So we were able to align on the values. We then did the same thing with our management team. We had our management team identify the values, and luckily, thankfully, they also picked, like 4 out of the 5 that we picked. So it meant that we were living those, we were representing those, we were instilling those in our team, which is super critical because it's all about how you act, what you do, why you do it.
And the other, we do the same thing. We ask the family, we ask the business, but we also ask you to ask some of your clients. Because again, you don't tell your clients, these are our core values. It's what you live and breathe. So if you ask your clients, if you could describe us in 5 words, what would you say? Right? So again, it makes that alignment. You go, wow, I didn't realize that. Or like, wow, this is pretty good. We don't even know our core values, but everybody else knows our core values.
Yep.
So it's really key to hone in on that. And particularly if you're an advisor working with a family, you can say, what are your core values? Because that will help you help the client when you know what's important to them for succession. Okay, so then we're going to get into the second circle, which is the business circle, which is where everybody focuses on, right? And really, it's where all the operations are in the business, right? It includes employees, management, and, the day-to-day business operations. It's also influenced by the other two circles, which is the family and the ownership. Okay, so people in this circle are paid a salary. So just remember that. These are the employees, people that work there, they're paid to be there.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So you want to talk about the business circle?
Sure. I mean, the business is essentially, what you think of it as, right? It's the operations of the entity. So it's making those decisions. It's developing the annual operating plan. It's making employment decisions, compensation decisions, succession planning, right? All those things, the financial management. It also involves the development of, mission and vision for the business. So, you rely on your executive team to kind of develop that as they're developing a strategic plan for the future of the business. It has to be aligned back to family vision, mission, and ownership vision, mission as well. That's what drives, what the executive team is going to be working on. As we said, it influences the other two circles, influences what's happening in the business.
Yeah, they can't be separate, like they're separate, but they're together. And you're gonna see how they're together in a little bit, but it's really
That's why they
important.
overlap.
That's why they overlap. This is where it's complex, right? This is where the complexity comes in, that you're putting in all of them. And like you say, your siblings, you don't get to choose your siblings, right? I'm an only child. I'm great. My husband has 10 siblings. So I'm like, thank God I'm an only child. I like that one and I like that one and I don't like that one. So it's complex, right? So it's hard enough, trying to plan things and do things as a family. And then you put in a business and you're back to who pulled my hair, or, you wouldn't let me do this. And you're 20 years younger than me. What do you know?
Mhm.
So understanding the business and the responsibilities in there are really important. And that the people who are involved in the business are paid to do a job. They are paid to do a role. So it's important as a family that you start to have policies and procedures and stuff around what are the roles. Because as a family member in a business, you just kind of go in because maybe the family rule is your blood, you get a job. It doesn't matter, we'll find something for you. Or it could be you have to qualify like everybody else. But every family is different, right? And the rules are different, but you have to understand how you can have accountability. Again, back to core values and mission and vision so that this family business can continue. So role succession is very important, really important to understand when someone comes in and someone leaves, who can fill that gap. And I don't care if you're a company of 4 or you're a company of 4,000, still everybody has a role to do. Right?
And you
So
want clarity.
clarity.
Clarity in those roles for sure.
Yes. And again, the mission, vision, and values, what is that? The vision is what do you want to do? You want to be the best widget maker? Do you want to be the best quality? What is it that you want to do as a company? Because that drives how your executive team actually executes what the family and ownership want. So it's really important to have that. So we strive to get mission, vision, and value in all 3 circles. And again, from the family, it's going to have an influence in the business. Right? But as you grow and develop, the core values might not change, but the vision and the mission might.
For sure.
Right? Like we
Yep.
think about Amazon. I mean, Jeff Bezos' first vision was to be the best bookseller in the world. So it's probably a little different now,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
So that changes, but the core values might not have changed,
Exactly.
right? So they sort of are who you are, and it's who the company is, what it's built on. It's like the legs, it's the foundation, right? But the vision and mission can change a little bit. And again, the role of the business, this is where you start to get the complexity, is to actually execute the vision of the family and the ownership. And when you're a family business, this is where it gets complex, right? Am I talking out of my ownership hat, my family hat, or my business hat?
Mhm.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But they're also responsible for all the financials around the company and the risk that's associated with the company. All right, does that sound pretty good? Anything dealing with the company, really. It's a pretty easy one.
And if you guys have questions, feel
Yeah,
free
feel
to
free to
jump in
ask.
at any time, by the way. We're not just up here to speak to you. We want to speak with you.
And then you got the last one, which is the ownership circle. And that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's anybody who has a stake in the company. And then what's the responsibilities?
Too many. But no, the ownership obviously first and foremost decides the structure, the type of entity you want to be. 70% of family businesses are pass-through entities, so that's obviously a big impact. Owners will have either, depending on the business, will either have the outright decision-making on dividends or at least have input on dividends that are paid out. Or distributions if you're a pass-through. They're obviously very focused on the long-term vision. That's one of the great things about family businesses is we don't think quarter by quarter, right? We think year by year, decade by decade, right? And to be able to instill that in your management team is super important as well. And certainly collaborating with family members who may not be owners, as well as collaborating with your management team as well is super critical as they are out there deploying your strategic vision, which is, as an owner, is probably your number one responsibility is developing what is your strategic vision. What do you want the business to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? From that, the management team will then develop their mission, and vision. They'll develop their strategic plan, right? To help attain whatever that vision is. So that's when we started our independent board, that was one of the first things that they came to us. They said, okay, great. We're here, we're ready, we can make decisions and all that, but like, what do you want? And we're like, well, we want to grow the business. Well, tell us more. Like there's more to it than that. And so we had to sit down and actually develop a strategic vision that talked about, how we wanted that business to grow, how we wanted to, our vision is to diversify our business so that we're not so reliant just on vanilla, that we want to be good stewards of the business, but also the environment and our stakeholders. We want to be, tops in the retail market and the food service market and within the top tier of industrial producers, right? So we gave both kind of quantitative and qualitative goals that we put in there for the management team to understand where we want to be.
So ownership, again, when you look at that you're really in collaboration with the family and the business, ultimately it's the owners who make the decision. And what you have to get is a ownership mind shift from I'm an owner, it's my way or the highway, I can do whatever I want. Ultimately, yes, as the owner, you can do whatever you want. But if you truly want this business to grow and become a legacy, you do have to engage the next generation. And the point is when you're first to second, you probably don't engage them soon enough, right?
For sure.
But you can still do it. Don't get me wrong. If you're 60 or 70 and you want to, or you're the next gen and you're not sure what's happening, you can start it. There's no better time. What was it? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best is today. So you start, right? And this is when we talked about it's the responsibility of the family to educate and to look after the next generation. Because when you talk about dividends, sometimes when we have family meetings, we might have a meeting that's just about understanding dividends because not everybody understands what a dividend is. Not real people understand what types of ownership there are. There are lots of different types of ownership. And again, this is where the complexity comes in, that if you founded the business, you're both the family, the owner, and we're going to get into this a little bit, and you work in the business. But you really have to say, I can be an owner and not work in the business. And that's really what we're going to get into. So let's just hop right into that now.
Yep.
So I have these. If you want a copy, you can take one and pass it on. This is the 3-circle model in its true form. So there's the family, the business, and ownership. But because they overlap, there's 7 positions within this circle. And each position has its own sort of roles and responsibilities. Don't worry, we're not going to go through roles and responsibilities for all time. We're going to talk about them now. But what's really important is to understand where you are or where your client is in these roles. And so, like I said, we have these hats out here. Whenever I'm in a family meeting or with a family, I always bring these hats so that they understand and they're asking a question. Are they asking it from a family, a business, or an ownership perspective? And how are you answering it? Are you answering it from a family, business, or ownership? Because the answers are different, right? And you have to be clear on when you're making this decision. I can tell you back in my first company, my COO would say to me, Tammy, are you asking me to do that as the owner of the company, or are you asking me to do that as an employee? Because if you're asking me to do that as an owner, we will make those changes. Because it's your call. If you're asking me that as an employee of this company, the answer is no, we have a process for that. You have to follow it like everybody else. And so you have to be clear, because what happens is, as an owner, the employees will do what you say,
Mhm.
not as what the policy and procedure is. So you have to be very clear when you have these hats on. So these 7, do I have the next one? Okay, so the first one is just a family member.
Yep.
I just say just a family member. That sounds bad, eh? Just a family. So you're not directly involved in the operations. Could be a spouse, could be one of the kids, right?
Yep.
In the business. Pretty clear? Number 2, non-family members. So just employees that are in the business. Just employees in the business. That's again, bad word. I gotta
Exactly.
take the word just out.
Just take
And
just out.
Just take just out, not just. 3 are just owners.
That one we can say it's just the owners, yes.
So these are owners who are not family and don't work in the business. So think about it. They could be, an angel investor. They could be maybe a company that you've acquired and they've stayed on as an owner, but they're not involved in the day-to-day operations. So you can have these people, right? Again, when you're looking at the perspective, they're going to be different, and we'll get to them as we get into the more complex one. Starting with number 4.
Yeah, this is where you start getting the overlap, right? So these are family members that have ownership stakes in the business, right? But aren't involved in the operation. So they're outside of the day-to-day operations, but they are an owner of the company.
And so this is where we talked about there's many different types of ownership, right? And we tend to think of when you're first to second gen, tend to think of an owner operator, because they own the business, their family, they work in the business, right? But as you get further along, a little longer in the tooth, you may want to exit. You may want to exit that business, but do you exit the ownership? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe ownership isn't going to be transferred until death.
Mhm.
Maybe you're going to sell it. So there's lots of different ways that you could become an owner. So there's owners who invest because they just want a dividend. There's owners who are there because they're just proud owners, right? Like, this is my family. Like, think of the Walton family. There's a lot of family members who don't work at Walmart, right? But they collect dividends, are very proud to say, oh, this is my, the vanilla. Here, Dad, here's my vanilla, right? So very proud. So there's different types of ownerships, and we're not going to get into all the different types, but just know that we tend to think of them as owner operators. And when you go to the next generation, you can actually have family members who are owners who are not involved
Yeah,
in the
and I think
day-to-day.
this is an important circle or important segment of the circle that people don't always consider as a family business, that are used to having family operators that are owners and in the family circle. And, when I talk to other family businesses and they're talking about their succession, and they say, well, my kids aren't really interested in joining the business. They're not interested in coming and taking over. And I say, okay, that's okay. My perspective, that's okay. But have you thought of, and so their instinct is, I have to sell it. And I say, okay, well, do you have to sell it, right? Isn't it okay for them to still own the business, but you can have independent operators, right? That maintains it as a family business, if that's truly what you want to do. Because there is a sense of disappointment, right? That the kids or, the next gen don't want to come in. And it's like, okay, well, they don't have to be operators. They can strictly just own the business. There's nothing, in, again, my perspective, other families have different perspectives, but that's okay to do. It still maintains that family ownership, and the culture and the values, right? Still stay there and maintain there.
That's why it's so important to have the core values, the mission and vision, right? Because if you do want it to maintain a family business, you can have it as a family business, but not actually be working in the business. And maybe if you have a long enough runway, you can say, we want to do that, but we're going to have to grow it in order to do that, right? So my role as a family business advisor is to find out what everybody's thinking. And I can tell you categorically that when I do discovery, and so that's really, I talk to everybody in the family, right? Whether you're in the business or not in the business, and I get their perspective on these 3 circles. I don't say this is a family question, a business question. I just have questions that are geared to, you're a family member not in the business. I'm going to ask you these questions, right? You're in the business, you have ownership, so they're different. And I can tell you that the ones who are not in the business, are very excited that they're actually having this discussion because they've never really had an opportunity because they're in a completely different industry. And the parents said, well, they're off. They're doing so well. They're fine. But they'd like to come into the business or they'd like to have ownership in the business. They're so proud of what the parents or grandparents have accomplished that they're not willing to give it up. And who's to say that their next generation won't be part of it? So it's not that you have to be an owner to be in there. It's like, what do we want to do as a family, which is back to that whole family circle and that alignment and that vision, mission, and values as a family. Yes, you know what? I'm very proud that this was, a 160-year-old company. I don't want it to end. Or I do want it to end. Nah, we don't care anymore. We're just fine. But if that's what your true goal is, then you have to look at these other options. And this is where the education comes in. Your role in the family circle is to educate and to raise the next generation. So maybe it's bringing them into meetings at an early age to understand how to read financial statements, understand what a dividend is, right? So again, it's all of this, it's this complexity and you don't know where to start. Right? It's so overwhelming. Like, I don't never talk to my kids about it. I have no idea. But I tell you, I've said this over and over again, I should invest in Kleenex because I've had calls when I get on the call and they're crying already. Because they know what this call is about. Like, I can't believe we've never been asked. Yeah, from anything, like I've got a farming family and one's a hairdresser, one's a lawyer. Like I want in the business. I don't want to drive the tractor, but I want to be involved in selling this produce and these 50,000 acres that we have. Like, I want to be involved in the land ownership and understanding that I can take my law degree and help on that. And they're thinking, well, they're off in Toronto on Bay Street, which is our big, Bay Street lawyers. But they were never asked. Right. And it doesn't mean that they're going to come in, but it's the opportunity to say no, to look at what the opportunities are in the family. And so 5 is the family members in the business, right? So you have a family member working in the business. So again, you have kids who maybe are not in the business, they're still in position number 1. And then you've got some kids in position number 5. So not owners yet, but they're working in the business.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a really hard position to be in, right? To be part of the family and to be working in the business, as are, the other kind of overlaps as well. But the challenge here is, I think it was talked about last night a little bit about, having to kind of prove yourself as a next generation, but also recognize that, if your name is on the business, people know that. And even if your name's not on the business, they still know that you're part of the family. And that's both a blessing and a curse, right? To be that individual.
And a lot of the tension and arguments in families are because you have a child in the business and one not in the business. And it looks a little bit like favoritism because maybe the child in the business has a car because the role requires them to have a vehicle, right? Because they're in sales or service or whatever it happens to be. But one of the kids who's not in the business doesn't have a vehicle and they have to get their own vehicle. So there's that little bit of resentment that happens because there's perks being involved in the business. And I always use the example, and you guys have 3M down here, and I would say, well, okay, well, if you worked at 3M and they gave you a car, does HR sit you down and say, Matt, you're getting this car because this role. Now, do you have any siblings that we should give a car to? Is there anything else? Like you're getting this, you're getting gym membership. Is there anybody else in the family who should have a gym membership? So it's understanding that is because of the role in the business, which is why it's important when we looked at the business circle to have accountability, roles and responsibilities, to understand and policies that everybody gets this. So if we're going to take somebody out of that role and put somebody else in, would they have a car? Would they have a gym membership? Yes. Is this because you're a family member? No, the family will get its own perks. Maybe everybody in the family gets a car, but that's a perk of being a family member. That's not a perk of the business.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the tension comes in, is understanding that working in the business is a role, just like any other company. And any other perks is based on that role.
And it also hinges on the whole equality versus fairness, right? Equal isn't necessarily fair, and fair is not equal, right?
So it's really understanding that dynamic of the benefits of the family versus the benefits of the business. And we spend a lot of time going over that because this is where a lot of the tension lies, right, in decision making. And this is, well, we'll get into talking about family meetings, but this is where you have family members, all they talk about business at the table and everybody else is like, why do I even go? Why bother? And then the sixth position is non-family members who work in the business and have ownership. So again, that might be a merger that you've done. Maybe you want to grow the business. Your vision and your mission is to grow and to expand into different areas. And so you've merged with somebody and they have an ownership, but they're still working in the business. So again, each area, each lens is different. When they're asking questions, they don't care about your family, right? Because they're an owner and they're looking for a salary and B, a dividend. They don't care what's happening. They don't not really necessarily in line with your mission, vision, values. Although if you're using your mission, vision, and values, they should be, or you wouldn't have bought the company.
Yeah,
Right? Was
for
that,
sure.
isn't there a commercial? I love the companies. I love the product so much about the company. Isn't that an old commercial?
Yeah.
Yeah, so same thing, right? You're going to either hire or you're going to acquire people who have, or companies that have the same mission, vision, and values as you. Maybe not the same mission, vision, but definitely the values.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the muddiest of them all, the muddiest, the worst one of all.
Yeah, this is
The
the
worst,
the
absolute worst.
family members that have ownership and work in the business, right? Like that is the most convoluted space to be in.
Messy.
And yeah, messy is exactly the right word, because you have your day-to-day role. That doesn't even have to be, sorry, my phone is ringing in my ear. It doesn't even have to be, oh, I just blanked on that one. Yeah, anyway, so it's
a mess.
It's the
When you
most
have
messy
family,
one.
business, and ownership, you don't even know what hat you're wearing when you're making comments or when you're answering questions. And I gave Matt an example. I have a family I work with that's, they work in 22 different countries. They have 400 employees. You'd think they'd have their poop together, right? First to second gen is the issue. And they don't understand the three circles. And one of the kids works in the business. So, she's up there, but she's in a sort of a lower level management position. And we're having a meeting and she was upset because there was a decision that was made at the executive level that she didn't understand and didn't know about. And why didn't she know about it? So haul out the hats. And we say, well, are you asking that from a business perspective? Because if you're asking that from a business lens, you had no right to know. You were not a C-suite. You were not in the decision-making. If you're asking from a family perspective, the question might be, when should we know about these big decisions? So should we know before it's announced to the company or before the decision is made? That's a family question. But to be in a meeting that you're not qualified for, because you wouldn't take any other person, if you took her out of that role and put a different person in there, would they have access to that same information? And the answer is no.
Mhm.
So understanding these three is key. I bring these to every meeting. And now families will say, I'm asking this from a business perspective. I'm asking this from an ownership perspective, right? So that you say, okay, well, I can answer this from this perspective because it is very muddy, right? And as a number 7, you are like, you don't even know where you are, particularly when you're first generation, because this is your baby, right? Like you started this company. This is your firstborn. You probably had the company before you had kids. And in all honesty, it's probably your favorite child, right? Like no grief. Well, there's a lot of grief. But you got to remember that this is where a lot of the struggles come, and going from first generation to second, and why only 30%, because as a parent, and I get this having transitioned, my son is still my son. He might be an adult with kids of his own, but I still see him as the kid who hid his plates under his bed and they grew penicillin, like honestly.
Yeah.
It's hard to get past that. So there's so many complexities when you're in number 7 that you have to, again, most of the time, I got to tell you, most of the time I'm brought in by Gen 2. Never by Gen 1, because Gen 1 doesn't realize there's a problem. Because it's their company, they make the decisions, it's my way or the highway, and what I say goes. And what do you know? And I must admit, I said that to my son. It's like, It took me a long time to get past that. Well, when I did it this way. But I mean, that's 30, 40 years ago. We had telephones and telephone books back then, right? I can remember getting my first computer. I was so scared of it. So it's really understanding where you are in that circle. And the position of the family is, what does the family want? They may be very proud of the work you've done. And they really want this to continue, but they're not a plumber. They're not an electrician. They're not an engineer. Like, how can I run a company? I don't know anything about plumbing, but there are many positions in a company, right? When you look at, who'd have thought social media? Who'd have thought that kind of marketing position would be there? So again, if you say, I'd like to be there, but there's not a full-time role as a marketing consultant or social media or whatever, well, then the role of the family is, you know what? We want to keep it as a family business. Maybe we need to grow it. So that goes down to the ownership. The ownership says, you say, okay, we want to grow. Are you on board? Yep. Ownership says to the business, we need to grow it. Come back with some ideas.
Yep.
Now you may be in all three meetings, right? So you are the owner, but you're also in trying to find ways to grow this business. How can we expand? What do we need to do? But you still have to report back to the owners. And yes, you're the owner. In First Gen, it might only be one or two. Generally, you know, there's a lot of structural, you might have a spouse in there as a, you know, from a tax perspective, there's reasons they're not necessarily engaged. So again, that becomes a different type of ownership. But it's explaining that. And this is where the family has a part in what you want to do and the ownership and then the business, how they all sort of connect.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
This is, I mean, to me, other than establishing values, like this is one of the most important things to understand as, particularly as a family owner that works in the business, is understanding which hat you're wearing at any given moment and the voice you're speaking with. Ultimately, if you are active in the business, if you're in this number 7 role or the number 6 role, then no matter what you do, people only look at you as an owner, right? And I had a significant challenge with that because before we started our independent board and brought in our non-family CEO, we did a lot of work around understanding the voice that we're speaking in and the hat that we're wearing so that we could separate, you know, our things there, right? And I was working with an executive coach at the time and I got really frustrated. And I said, you know, I'm in these leadership meetings and I'm, you know, just trying to be part of the team, right? And I'm just giving my opinion. And he said, well, yeah, that's great, but you have to recognize that you give an opinion. It's not just the opinion of the VP of strategic planning. It is the opinion of Matt Nielson, the owner, right? So it taught me a few things. One, that to recognize that no matter what, I'm always being perceived as speaking in the voice of an owner. Also, it taught me that I can't be the first one to speak in a meeting, right? Like I have to be one of the last ones to speak in a meeting because I don't want to frame that conversation. Because if I say something and it is a terrible idea, nobody else in the meeting is going to come out and say, like, sorry, Matt, you're completely wrong. We need to do this, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. And then the other complexity, the other piece is knowing your voice, but also making sure that when people are speaking to you, that you understand which voice do they want you to respond in. We had that challenge with our first non-family CEO. He would come and talk to my siblings and I, and we assumed he was coming to us as executives in the business. We reported to him. So he was just getting our opinion on, you know, we're thinking about this. What do you think about it? Da, da, da. And we discovered after a while that he then was taking our thoughts and then running with those ideas. And then we would come to a board meeting with the independent board and the independent board would say, well, why are you doing that? I said, well, I talked to the owners. They said, this is what we should do. Well, that's not the dynamic, right? The CEO reports to the board reports to the shareholders. So he was wrong in asking us as owners. We didn't understand that he was asking us as owners. So once we discovered that, once we had that revelation, we then started asking the question, okay, are you asking me as the VP of strategic planning or are you asking me as an owner? And if the response is I'm asking you as an owner, then it's sorry, I can't give you an opinion on that. My role here is not as an owner. My role here is as a VP or whatever it may be, right? So it's important to do that. And we do the same thing with the board, you know, the board and our board does a really good job of saying, okay, as owners, what do you think about this? We sit on the board as well, so they do a good job of doing that, but if not, we'll clarify. We're like, okay, are you asking us as owners, or, you know, are you asking me as a fellow director? It's really important to clarify and then understand the voice that you're responding in.
And again, I think, sorry, go ahead.
So just a question for Matt. You mentioned last night and today a couple times that process of developing that your independent board.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with an assumption that you and your siblings were always in that 7 position. So like, what, can you talk a little bit, like, what was the impetus or the drive? Like how did you guys get to a point where you were like, we need, want, crave,
Yeah.
or are afraid of, but want to do it anyway? Like,
Yeah,
How did you-
we recognized a long time ago, like 20 some odd years ago, that we wanted to do an independent board of directors, because we wanted outside influence, outside expertise, experience, all that. At the time, my mom was chair of the board, and she said, no way. Not bringing anybody else in. I'm not giving up control
And I
of
don't
the
want anybody
business.
to know in my
Yeah,
inside
and I don't-
information, right?
exactly.
That's a big thing with family businesses.
Yeah.
They keep everything pretty close to the chest.
Yeah, for sure. So once we executed the buyout of my mom, and got through 50+% of the payout for that, just to make sure she didn't try to take
back
it back in any way, even though legally, like, that wasn't possible, but you know, there's this fear in your head.
It's your mother. She
Um,
can do what she wants.
Exactly.
I brought you in, I can take you out.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Then we started the process of then working with consultants to develop the plan of doing an independent board. And that's also why this was so important, knowing the hats that we were wearing, the voices, because to bring in independent directors, they wanted to know that they weren't going to come in and just either be rubber stamps or just there to offer an opinion and not, you know, be listened to or valued, right? Like it's not an effective way to utilize a board of directors. So we had to prove to them through the process that we understood this, and same with the non-family CEO. So once we did the independent board, we brought in about 1.5 years later, our first non-family CEO. And it was the same process of like, you know, because in this instance where we're in number 7, right? We were reporting to the CEO, the CEO was reporting to the board, which we were on, and the board was reporting to the shareholders, which was us. So it's a little
What hat are we
complicated, right?
wearing?
Yeah, exactly.
You
It's a
only
little-
made that?
it's a little
Come on.
complicated. Our current CEO likes to call it a Mexican standoff. It's just like, everybody's got a gun pointed at each other and it's just who's gonna pull the trigger first, right? But no, it comes down to this, right? And our current CEO does a really good job at, you know, how he communicates with us, and understanding the voice that we're doing. That's the key.
did he have private company or family company experience before coming to you guys?
He did because he grew up in a family business, but he never worked in the business. So he had private business experience prior to coming with us. But he does tell us that one of his, you know, one of the decision factors or things that provided him comfort in taking on the role was knowing that there was an independent board in place, that it wasn't just family members.
That is key, I think, having an independent board. And there's a couple of different kinds of boards. I don't think we're going to get into that today, but there's also understanding if it's a advisory board or fiduciary board. Those are, again, different, but I think just having an advisory board to start is
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
Because if you've got only family members on the board and they all work in the business, they all have ownership, it's like, you know, again, where's the discussion? What hat are you wearing and why? It's always nice to get another opinion.
Yeah.
An outside opinion that's
And
not.
they
vested.
help you see the white space that maybe you're not seeing, right? Like they see the opportunity that's there that maybe you don't because you've been involved in the business so long. I was asked the question last night about our growth and what, you know, kind of helped with that and what drove that. And I should have said, I realized it last night as I got into bed. I'm like, oh my God, I should have totally said that. The independent board by far was the biggest impact on our growth. When we started our independent board, we were probably around 30 million. We're now north of 75 million. So that's over the last 10 years that we have more than doubled the size of our business. And I would like to say that we could have done it ourselves, but the reality is I don't think we would have without the independent board of directors and without our non-family CEO.
And I think that's pretty much true for every company because, you know, you're doing things the way you've always done it. You're always the same people. You know what's going to work. He's like, well, I know what he's going to say. I know, I'm not even going to bother bringing that up. Right. But so when you get other people's opinions that you respect, you go, okay, well, now it's not you. It's like when I lead family meetings, it's not your mom or your dad telling you or tell, you know, asking those questions or in their home. It's a neutral third party. Right? And they can see opportunities. You go, well, it wasn't Matt who suggested that. It was Catherine. Well, maybe we should consider that because I'm not going to consider Matt because he pulled my hair. So, you know, I don't want to do that. So it's really
Yeah.
that, you know, understanding that and why. And it's very difficult for families to bring in third parties, particularly as a lead, like as a CEO.
Mhm.
But it saves a lot of grief, I can tell you, instead of having three siblings trying to fight over who's going to be the new leader. And why? You're the youngest. Why are you? You're the oldest. Is that because you should? Like, why? So you can each still run your own, you know, silo.
Yeah.
And report.
It helped us
Importantly, that's-
alleviate that decision making that I talked about last night, the 2 against 1 kind of scenario. And it wasn't something we were consciously thinking about going into it, but by doing the independent board and then even the non-family CEO, it actually improved our relationships as a family greatly because of the fact that we weren't having to make all these decisions together and having conflict through that process.
Yeah, importantly, that's a good sign to your customers and to investors that you're now a serious-minded company, not just coasting based on multi-generational success, but okay, we're really trying to become serious about what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just what was the process like to find the CEO? Have you gone through multiple or was it?
Yeah, why don't we touch base afterwards so that we can, you know, go through this, but I'm happy to chat about that.
So just to remind you, these are the different, does it have the names on the circles? Yeah, so just to remind you what position they are and where they are, because you're gonna go back and go, okay, yeah,
They can write it in.
they can write. So, I mean, so that's great. We've talked about the 3-circle model. It's really important to understand that, yep.
I'm curious, I work with leadership teams and a lot of family businesses, but I'm like, the thing that I'm curious if you see, it doesn't need a separate circle per se, but the difference between working in the business and a leadership team seat in the business. Like even the dynamic you mentioned earlier, like the employee who's part of the family that wasn't involved in the leadership team decision. Because that's a conversation I have sometimes with my clients is just because you're part of the family and an owner does not mean you get A, to be an employee or B, a leadership seat. So can you speak at all about that?
Well, that comes to each family has their own decision on that. It can be just because you are a family member, you can be allowed to be working in the business. That's a family decision. Or you cannot come into the family business unless you qualify like any other person would qualify. Now, you might have the advantage that you get the guidance and the education and the mentoring from the family that says, okay, well, you want to come in, I need you to go get an HR designation first or something. So that's the family decision, right?
Yeah.
Which then leads into the business decision. The leadership, again, it's all back to having policies and procedures and understanding accountability, who's accountable, so there's an accountability chart and then there's an org chart.
Yeah.
Right. So it's having those to understand, here's where my succession could be. I'm starting as the receptionist because I'm going to get to meet tons of people. I'm going to understand the questions that come in, like whatever, and then I can work my way up here. Or I'm going to be a junior in the accounting department, or I'm going to be out in the field, or I'm going to be a mechanic, or whatever it happens to be. And you can see the progression and what the roles and responsibilities are within that seat. And then what the accountability is. So that's again, one of the things that we look at with family businesses, they don't have them. A lot of family businesses that are first going to second don't even have job descriptions.
Right. Oh,
Like
yeah,
it's like
100%.
Susie's been with me for 35 years. She still uses a journal to write the expenses on. I mean, it's really about understanding what you want to be as a family business and then making sure it's documented because it's accountable.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So anybody in the family can join if you can pass one of these. Or you know what? You can sweep the floor. If you, nothing else, you can sweep the floor.
Yeah.
Right? But then that causes a problem. So you want to have, if you're a family business, you have good core values and a good vision, mission values. When you bring a family member into the business, you want them to have the respect. Right? So they have to be qualified because they're always going to be DOB, daughter of boss, right? Now she's the boss of the boss, but understanding what role you have. And so my role is to get the family aware of why this is important.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I just, in
employment
my mind,
policy-
it's like, I almost see like another number, like a number 8 or something, which is like the person that's in the family, but not on the leadership team. I don't know, because I just feel like there is quite a distinction there.
Well, yeah, it can be, but they still work in the business,
Right,
right? And so that leadership might be something that happens over time.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know, first of all, that an employment policy, right, helps with that.
Yeah.
From the family perspective. You know, when I started working in our family business when I was 15, sweeping floors and cleaning tanks.
Yeah.
I thought I should have been in the corner office, right, at
Exactly,
15.
exactly.
And then.
I didn't realize how hard it is to be in the corner
Well,
office.
exactly.
It's easier to sweep the floors.
Exactly. And then, you know, we opened our factory in Europe the year after I graduated college, and somebody needed to go there. My brother had been married, they just had a kid, his wife had just opened her optometry practice, so my mom's like, I'm not gonna send them. My sister wasn't involved in the business at that time, I had just joined. For some reason, she didn't think sending a 23-year-old to live in Amsterdam was a good idea. I don't know why, so she went, right, like for the 2 years, but I mean, the thing is like, I wasn't experienced enough.
Right.
Aside from not being maybe mature enough, but I also wasn't experienced enough to go run an operation
Yeah.
in a foreign country, right? Like, so you have to set those expectations.
Right, I
and
think
teach
that's
those.
it. It's the expectations and it's the communication. like
Yeah,
you
and
said,
that happens in
because-
the family circle, right?
Right,
Mhm.
right. Because it's one thing to say, well, we have this all documented. Here's our accountability chart. Here's your potential path. But it's, I think, a different situation to actually have those conversations.
Yeah,
and
that's where you do
the
the,
relationship.
how do you get the alignment is by having the communication in the family meetings. And this is where you can explain that. What does the entry look like? And you can start to have these conversations when the kids are 12. Like you can bring them in and sit in family meetings, or you pick your own age and they don't get a say yet, but they're listening on how it actually works and how communication works with the family business.
Mhm.
And yep,
It's a follow on to what Laura just asked, which is, anytime you have a family member in the business in a subordinate position, the people who have to supervise that person are in a tricky spot.
Yes.
An adverse review of the owner's child, could have consequences. And how do you give those assurances?
Yeah, you have to have,
It's the business hat. I
Yeah,
understand,
right,
but-
exactly. So you have to have strong leaders. You have to have family members, whether they're in the ownership circle or in the business circle, stay out of those conversations. So part of our employment policy says that, like, I can't interview any other family member for a role. I can't supervise any other family member for a role. Somebody else has to do that. And it's about building trust with your team, with your leadership team, or you know, anybody in the organization, so that they can feel free to make decisions regardless of what it is, whether it's about a family member or not. And make those decisions without fear of retribution. Now, it's not easy, right? Because there could be, you know, if you have multiple family members in there and they have, you know, you have multiple kids in, one branch may handle that slightly better or worse than another branch might, right? So, it's a very difficult position to be in. You ask for those individuals to be honest and transparent, and in our case, we ask them, you know, to follow kind of the letter of the policy. So if
That's the
somebody
accountability, right?
yeah, that's the accountability. If somebody is not performing, then that's not good for the business on multiple levels, right? It's not gonna help us attain our strategy. It's also gonna negatively impact the culture of the organization, right? It doesn't fit our values, like there's so many components of it. Still, it is a hump for people to get over.
Yeah, have you ever seen any, kind of belt and suspendering it so that there's almost an appeal process? If the supervisor who has delivered the bad news gets chewed out by, you know, is there recourse with other family members? Is it with the board?
No, I
I think it
haven't.
goes down to the policies, I think, that
Yeah.
just like when you do your job review, your review of anybody else, it's the same criteria. So if you know what that role is required to do, if there, and then you have to be able to cite examples of why or not. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, but that's the key, is you can't just say, well, he's not doing a good job. Well, why? He was this and this. The other thing is to understand what the person is doing in the role, because sometimes the person is in the role just to learn about the role because they're going through different departments,
Yeah.
right? So understanding what they're doing, is this the role that they're going to be in, that they were trying to traject through? And what is the reason? Is it attitude? Is it, they're showing up late? Like, as long as they're documented, any family member will get that, because as a family, you've talked about it, right? And this is where you got to have these meetings that said, this is how our behavior is. So we expect you to be above everybody else, for one thing.
Mhm.
Okay, above. You're a family member. This is how you're going to act, right? And then understanding they're not doing their role. What are they not doing? Just like you would document anybody else, and then you'd go on to the next. The only time
Yeah.
I've seen issues is when families don't have the policy that a family member can be in charge of another family member.
Mhm.
That's when that's just
Yeah.
a mess.
Yeah.
That's just a mess. First thing I say is, do not have another family member supervising another family member, because sometimes they can excel fast, right? Because they are good, because it tends to be older versus younger, right? When they go into the business. But it really comes down to just making sure you're documenting, but that you have good criteria in order to say, are they doing their job?
Yeah.
Why are they not performing?
And we have utilized, and our board has volunteered to, it's not necessarily the role of the board, but they have participated in feedback to family members
Mhm.
about performance. I think and those were senior family members, so it's a little bit more of an opportunity for a board to do that. I think another thing that to consider is, if you're going to employ a family member, particularly in a junior role, is consider providing them a mentor, right? Separate from their supervisor,
Yeah.
who can then also help. I mean,
And also. not
best
family
case is you
member.
don't get to
Not
the
a family
point, right,
member.
where, well, also not, but best case is you don't get to the point where they're gonna get put onto a performance plan, right, or something like that, because the mentor is working with the supervisor to help communicate expectations and where they may not be performing well.
And they should,
Adjustment
hopefully
can be
they've
made.
qualified for the role they're in, so it's not just someone that doesn't know the role. So
Yeah.
this is where it becomes so complex, right? But I know we have to wrap up. So the other thing is, how do you achieve all this? It's really great to say it. But really, it's communication, and there's lots of tools out there to learn how to communicate with the family, because as a family business advisor, I'm working with the family. What Matt's talking about is really all family dynamics, right? To understand the family. The business has its own, people to help the business, the governance, there's all that, but alignment is what you want. Family meetings are key. And I think family meetings that are facilitated by a third party are like key, because I cannot even do my own family meetings. And I know, and I do this for a living, and I can't do my own because I go into mom mode, and the kids go into kid mode. And you can't have it in your own home. You can't have it in the business. You have to have it in a neutral location where everybody feels that they could be heard and safe and all that kind of stuff. But family meetings are key. And then understanding what the succession plan looks like. So you need to have this documented, and you need to share it with your family, and also the estate plan that we talked about, because this is where families can be torn apart. Is, well, I thought I was getting that. I thought I was getting grandma's ring. No, I was getting grandma's ring. It could be something very simple, and you can blow a whole family apart. And the other thing is, you can talk about this, and you can answer questions on why you've done this. Once you're dead and gone, you can't tell them why you decided to do that. What was the thought process? This way you can share it and maybe get some ideas and go, oh, I didn't realize that. Let's have this. So I know that, as a first generation, we do like to keep things that we don't want our kids to know if we have money or don't have money, although they know. I mean, they know, right? To a certain degree. But you have to be able to share that. And again, you at an early age to understand what we have and what the responsibility is and what does this look like. Well, I'm not giving you anything, it's going into trust. We're going to open a foundation. We're going to do whatever, right? You want to do this as a family. So I think that's important, and it's to be documented and shared as much as possible.
Yep, for sure.
And that's it. Do we, on time?
Yes.
Perfect. I did get the old 5-minute warning.
No, I said 15.
Oh,
So-
15.
So we have
We have time
about,
for
we have about
questions.
5 minutes. We
I
have
can go
some
back.
time for questions, yeah. And we have, we can take some from the audience.
Sure.
Yep.
And then we also have cookies and other things. If anybody wants those, you can stay longer because I think we've done our run for yesterday and today after this, so take your time. But any questions, anyone?
I have a question and I could make a statement also, but one thing I was curious about, Matt, because you mentioned you came into the business right out of college, but it sounds like you were working there before. But what made you decide you wanted to do that? Or is there any one thing you can point to, or what aspect?
Starting the business.
Yeah, what was it about it that appealed to you coming out of college?
I can say that I consciously made the decision when I was around 13 that I wanted to join the family business. I think the big impetus to that was wanting to work with my father, was the big thing. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was in college. So the summers that I worked, from when I was 15 until 22, I worked all but one summer on the production floor. I had the opportunity to work with him, but not as closely as I wanted. So that was kind of the driving impetus. But the other piece was also recognizing that, you know, this was part of our family legacy. And I felt a certain responsibility to carry it on. I was also very business minded. Things that I did in high school from leadership development, things I did in college from both the leadership development as well as academically, were very focused on going into the business and doing that. So that was, I would say those were kind of the two big reasons. So I had the passion to do it, which I think is super critical, right? And that's the only, maybe not the only reason, but certainly one of the reasons why it worked well for me going in right out of college. We don't allow that now. My brother also went into it right out of college. My sister worked 15 years outside of the business, and then there was an opportunity for her to come in, and she decided that it was the right time to do it. But we do require next gens now to work outside of the business for a certain number of years to, for two reasons: to one, gain experience of how another organization works. Like I like to say, I only know the Nielson-Massey way, right? Like I don't know how anybody else does things. So I think that's really important. But the other component of it also is it helps reinforce their desire to join the business, right? So if they go do something else and they love it, great, right? Like you can continue that because we're not going to kick you out of the family. We're not going to kick you out of potential future ownership. It's not just about the employment. So I want you to follow your passion, because if you come in here and you're not committed and you're not passionate to the business, it's not going to work, right? Like you're not going to perform well, regardless of your experience and skill sets.
You have that in reverse, because some of our family businesses have that. So where people go out and they go into the quote unquote real world, doesn't work out. And then in their 40s, they're like, hey, can I go back to the family business? And some of our family businesses say, nope, you can't come back later. You have a certain window.
Every family is different.
Yeah.
Like it's based on, again, it's back to that family and what the decision is for the family.
Yeah.
You know, again, everybody is entitled to a role regardless, or you have to qualify, you have to be gone. Like and that's what is so important, is you have to have these meetings to understand what you want, what's the best for the family. It's not just the founder's decision. It might, ultimately, it's their decision at
Yeah.
the first, but you know, as you start to go in the generations and you want to keep this, because you remember that family businesses are like, they're going to be 40 years old, right? If you started right from the get-go. So they've got this long history. So do you want to just take 40 years of the hardest work there is to get a business off the ground and hand it off to somebody else? Or can you maintain ownership and have somebody else with the skill set run it and sit back and guide it through the governance and the ownership side?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you have that? Can people come back later in line?
Well,
Because again,
in
it's whether
theory,
if they're qualified.
in theory, but they have to be qualified, right? We
Okay.
won't, and again, part of our employment policies, we won't create a role for an individual. There has to be a job opening. They have to apply for it and compete against anybody else that
Okay.
applies. So But I have one nephew who works in the business now, the other one doesn't. They both in the past had applied for roles and did not get them because they weren't quite
Do you have to change your
qualified.
last name?
We
Brown?
joke that there's no more Masseys in the business, but people joke that they're gonna change their name to Massey. But so I mean, in theory, yes, somebody at 40-year-old could come into the business
Right.
if they're qualified and if there's an opening and all that. We're not gonna necessarily
And how many
create that
employees do you
role.
have?
We have 80 right now in the US.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I have a question, I got a trivia question. How many generations do you think the oldest family business in the world is? How many generations? The oldest in the world?
60.
How old is that Japanese hotel company? Is that the one you're thinking?
47 generations.
47.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a Japanese hotel company that's.
Hoshirokunin. This is gonna be the first year, as the first succession that'll be led by a female.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep.
Oh, like big changes, always male. And so that was a big commitment to keep that in the family. Now, they did adopt son-in-laws into the family to make it go to a male. So, because at the point women couldn't own it, but this is the first year. So 46 generations.
Do you happen to know how many
You
the
had a question?
Rothschilds have?
I'm sorry, what?
The Rothschilds, how many do they have at this point?
I don't know.
The
No.
Shirley plantation is the oldest one in the US. That's like 17 and something or
Yeah.
other. And Molson Coors is
And
Canadian.
Gildan, there's some
So
of
they're
those.
two
There were.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I was just curious, with the Nielson-Massey, was it two separate families at one point or like?
Yeah, so the quick story is that Richard Massey founded the company in 1907. My grandfather joined at a really young age, around 1917, became a shareholder in the 20s. And then when Richard Massey passed away in 1950, my grandfather bought the rest of the company from his estate. So it's been owned by my family exclusively since the 50s. We've actually had consolidation kind of along the way, which is a bit unusual. I mean, being 118 years old, we're only third generation, first off, so people expect us to have, like more deeper generations. But also the fact that we only have, now we only have 4 shareholders is pretty unusual also, but it's because, we went from 2 families to 1 family. And then my grandfather sold it to my dad and his son, brother-in-law. My dad bought his brother-in-law out in the mid-80s when he retired. So then it became just our immediate family. So, but now we're at 4 and we expect it to go out that way. Yeah.
More questions?
Was there anything online?
Good question. Thank you, sir.
Surveys, Catherine says, complete your surveys, you
Okay,
can't leave.
I did ask them. Okay, nobody said anything.
Okay.
So thank you all very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I have my handy dandy little gift giving door prize. We'll pick 3. So you can put your business card in here. If you could finish out the survey, that would be lovely. If you don't have a business card, you can write on a piece of paper. Or you can take an impact.
Or put your survey.
Yeah. So, anybody, you wanna, I don't have any door prize people now. There we go. We got this right. Okay.
There you go. Oh, that's a good idea.
Okay, you can fold it in half.
That was a good.
There we go. It's a good,
Yeah, so-
yeah, take it, fold it in half.
Oh,
There we go.
Yeah, the one that like was on the
Okay.
original is probably.
Okay.
Yeah. You want all those surveys? Or not?
Yes,
And
please.
then,
You can just leave them.
and then I have a newer one.
because you're.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to
Um,
hold your napkin?
And then there was a newer one, which I think she used last
Well, not your
night,
napkin,
which
sorry.
I don't like, but, so.
Yeah, fold your napkin and put it in. Oh, well, there we go.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's an old one.
Did you run, right?
But,
Here, right on the.
yeah, we need to update.
I'll
it
get mine,
because
I'll
there's
get
anyways
mine.
not-
All right, how about you?
Show
You have mine.
our,
I have
the
yours.
3
Okay,
separate
and I'm
ones,
yours,
so
and
we
you have yours, Lindsay?
Make updates.
Okay, you can fold your
It'll be-
name tag
It'll be
in
the
half,
time to do all that.
and then you could be a proud owner of the report.
Thanks.
Okay. So everybody who's in who wants to be in? Yes. Okay, Matt, I'll let you.
Oh, I get
pull
that.
one. Yep. No birthday. Okay, There we go.
Mike Anderson.
Hey.
Figure out how we do that. Timmy, you can pull one. There we go. Who is that?
Thank you.
Deirdre, excellent. Deirdre, that's one. Deirdre's
So
right
lucky.
there. And Todd, since I worked you so hard, you can pull the last one.
So these books
Do more
are,
work.
My husband.
the first
Aw.
book is about how to align your family and business for the first transition. So it's basically a starter. Like I
Carrie,
said, it's
you go.
very, it's like grade 5 reading, very simple,
Right.
all the jargon's taken out. And the second one is about mission, vision, and values and how to actually get them done. So it's how to, the questions to ask. So a lot of work pages in there. So hand it out, and they're intentionally very small so that first gens will read them because they tend not to want to read business books, most of them. But it's also good because you can just quickly scan through it and then hand it off to somebody. So anyway, enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Now, I'm